Welcome. Thank you for taking the time to hopefully be a bit inspired about how you can run successful CX transformation. Because what I see is that a lot of CX programs are struggling. So I'm happy to share my vision and how we've been successfully running several CX transformation programs. So let's dive in. Just a short intro about myself. So I've been in experience for over 25 years. Yes, 25 years. Of course, it wasn't called experience back then. But I've been doing this for 25 years because I have a tiny dream to change the world, which for me means helping companies treat people well. So people for me, customers and employees. But that's a very fluffy and vague topic. So what I realized quickly is if I want to be successful in convincing them to treat people well, I need to speak their language, meaning I need to translate customer and employee experience into their language, right? Meaning hard steerable information. So that's why I decided next. I've always worked as an organization consultant, for example, with the Capgemini, but now I've been freelancing already for almost 15 years. So I decided to do a PhD to next to my job at Capgemini to start a PhD at a university to prove, right, to study and to prove, okay, actually treating people well, customers and employees, yields financial results. So based on that, of course, nobody's going to read any, like statistical PhD worthy articles. So I started blogging. I started translating those insights in, okay, but what does a company learn from this? What can they start applying tomorrow? That's why I wrote a book about it. And now I've already created a lot of podcasts, videos, right? So I'm always sharing my knowledge with the world because I think we need to elevate the quality of CX as a whole. So you have a bit of idea of my background, and I've been running CX transformation programs internationally for several years now, right? So multi-year programs where indeed we successfully prove that, hey, if you do CX transformation well, and that's a very important nuance, I'm going to explain today in this presentation what's often going wrong, then you can definitely see business impact, and it doesn't take years to do that. Okay, so what's my vision? Right, so I think for you, it's important to understand how I'm looking at CX transformation so you know where I'm coming from. So the first perspective I always share is these three types of organizations. So you have a product or production centric, a customer and a human centric organization. And for me, the goal is to help companies move towards human centricity. So let me explain a bit the three. So the production centric company, I would claim that 95% of all companies today are using that system. You've probably heard about KPIs, you've heard about task steering, right? So it's a very control based, actually fear based system. And it was created over 100 years ago. So when we had the Industrial Revolution, a lot of companies grew very fast. So they needed to figure out a way to manage that, to control it. And that's where scientific management comes from. So KPIs, task steering, etc. And that brought us a lot, right? A lot of companies have been very successful. But nowadays, in a very quickly changing environment where you want employees to feel empowered, where you want to experiment and really create a learning mindset, then this control-based, task-driven, fear-based system is no longer effective. Because in order to learn, right, I don't need to have fear that I cannot make any mistakes. I need to feel empowered to, okay, go and try and see what works. So around 30 years ago, companies started thinking, maybe it's a good idea to understand what customers want. And I would say that a lot of companies want to be here for sure. I'm not sure if they are because they're also struggling. Okay, but how do I do this customer centricity? Because right, this system that's 100 years old is still very strong, right? So challenging to figure out other ways of doing it. And for me, and also more and more companies are embracing this human centricity. So what do I mean by that? Because this can also be like a 10-year vague cultural program. But for me, human centricity is really putting your customers, employees, and purpose back in the heart of the organization. So everything I design, each intervention is always from the perspective of connecting the three because they are very well connected, right? The number one driver of customers is almost always the human aspect, which links perfectly to the sense of purpose of employees of, hey, indeed, I love to focus on giving personal attention instead of only needing to focus on, let's say, speed of doing things or average handling time, right? So CX, EX, and purpose are a very beautiful marriage. And I'll explain that in more detail. So another crucial perspective that I'm always using is how do you translate CX into the daily work of employees? Too many CX teams are way too disconnected from the operations. So for me, I'm not a fan of KPIs, but if I wanted to, or if I needed to choose one KPI, for me, it would be that the employees in their daily work are saying, hey, yes, these insights or these interventions that I'm receiving from CX are really helping me in my daily work to add more value to customers, to make it more fun, to be more efficient. Right? So everything, yes, you think strategically and conceptually, but in the end, super pragmatically translated into the daily work of employees. Because that's where you anchor it in the DNA, right? It should not be a separate program in the daily work. If you can get it integrated in routines, that's where it becomes ingrained in the system of the organization. So if you want to be successful in CX transformation, right? So not just operational CX, to me, that's something very different. I've also recorded a podcast on the difference between operational and transformational CX, if you want to check that out. But I think there are 5 goals, 5 topics that you want to achieve. In this presentation, I'm going to walk you through number 1 and 2 because they are the most profound and they are also the starting point. But what are the 5 goals? So number 1, you have to make sure that you understand what really drives your experience of customers. And when you're listening, when you hear me say this, you probably think we know this, right? We're measuring NPS and they also have drivers. But I'm sure after going through this presentation, you will understand, maybe we don't actually know what drives customer experience. And you will also know a new technique to make sure that you do find those drivers. Tiny cliffhanger already. Okay, then you have insights, right? You have a lot of insights, but how do I translate that into concrete action where employees feel super energized and leaders as well to actually do something with the insights? Then step number 3 is, okay, we have all these siloed departments. How can we organically work together? Because there's no way that you can improve a customer journey just with one department, right? You need all those departments to work together. So that's where journey management comes in, right? To really have this organic way of collaborating across departments without like fully restructuring the organization, at least not at the start. Then step 4 is all connected to leadership. And so how do you as a leader lead by example? How can you super tangibly ask questions to your team for them to understand, hey, this CX thing is not just window dressing or nice to have. This is really something that we care about. Right? So I'm not just being steered on production targets. I'm also regularly being asked, for example, hey, Zanna, thinking back of last week, when did you feel you had the biggest impact on the customer? Or where a leader asks you, hey, what is maybe one thing I can do to help you enhance your impact on customers? All around leadership. And then fifth, and yes, consciously last, and in my opinion, least, the financial impact. Why least? Because when I started out 15 years ago, we still needed to prove the financial benefits of CX. And that was hard work. But now McKinsey, Forrester, we as well in our programs, we've proven multiple times that yes, there's a lot of financial gains to be made. And so now the question is not to convince companies that CX matters. The question is, okay, but how do I design CX in such a way that it can start reaping those financial benefits? And it's not just commercial, right? Like more revenue or growth, or GP growth. It's also definitely on the cost reduction side. We've seen that also on multiple occasions. That there's huge win-win between happier customers and reducing unnecessary costs. All right, so we're now going to dive into 1 and 2, but first, let's see what problem we are actually solving, right? So what is the issue when you look at number 1? Why do we start with research? Because that's where 95% of CX programs go wrong, but they're not aware that that's the key issue that's causing them to take too long or not seeing the business impact or not being able to convince other departments. Okay, so when it comes to research, um, I mean, all companies are measuring a lot, right? There's no lack of research. I would claim that the quality of the research or the type of research is where things go wrong. So what do you see happening? These questions here, these 5 questions on the left, most companies, they don't know if they're asking the right questions from the customer perspective. They don't know which has the biggest impact. They're struggling, okay, but NPS, CES, customer effort score, satisfaction. When do I need which metric? Which then leads to a lot of assumptions still being around. Everybody can just choose their own, um, let's say, the topic that matters most to them, right? It becomes a personal choice. And that also means that it takes a long time before you get any measurable results. And so looking at the right questions, the tooling companies or research companies, they tend to either create a list, right, with NPS, like what are root causes that I can choose from, or an open text. And as I'll explain later, they will not get you the true latent subconscious need of customers. You might think you found drivers, but actually something else matters more to them. Then either they don't do any statistical analysis, right? They just count the number of times that invoicing is mentioned or that, I don't know, the waiting time is mentioned, which is a very flawed way of figuring out the drivers. Or they say, yes, we found the drivers, but then when you look under the hood, they have a very strange way of calculating what has the biggest impact. The metrics, as I mentioned, right, using the NPS, for example, on a very transactional level, or using customer effort score only in a customer service setting. So I'm also going to share, hey, when should you use which metric? Is that compass, right? These 3 questions together are setting your compass, right? So you know exactly, okay, where should I impact to have the biggest business impact. If you don't, then as I mentioned, right, the director of sales can keep, banging the drum. Hey, speed matters. The director of customer service can keep saying, no, it's all about personal attention. And that slows your transformation down because you don't have the answer, right? Everybody can just keep shouting and pushing for what they think is the biggest topic for customers. That also means that your execution power is diminished. That means it takes longer or you don't see any measurable effect of your improvements because you don't know for sure, okay, but what are the most important things for customers that we should be working on? Sometimes, right, so a lot of CX professionals that I meet are really into, let's say, the qualitative side of research. I'm not saying that that's not valuable, but I am saying that has a specific place. And too often I see that qualitative research is not the type of research that will convince boards. It will not help prioritize, all the things that are already running. Everybody's super busy. They have a gazillion things to do, and qualitative research is not the tool that they need to prioritize. So you need these hard, steerable insights that I'm going to show you, because only then you can actually start prioritizing the improvements. Then you can also energize the employees to do something with it. And as a consequence, you get measurable results not in a few years, but in 3 months' time. So these smart statistics that I'm going to explain to you, they are really important if you want to move from operational CX and just measuring touch points or doing qualitative research to really facilitating transformation and helping your organization succeed. That's why the first step for me is always starting with finding the drivers, because um, that's where you show what really matters the most. That's where you show, hey, you have 10 improvements. Which of these 10 have the biggest impact? That's where you speak the language. So you create this openness where other departments feel, hey, now I see the value of this CX thing, right? Now it becomes tangible. Okay, I'm going to show you what that looks like. So as I mentioned, 15 years ago, I need to work really hard to prove that, hey, CX has financial impact. By now, there is a ton of proof, and I always like to just summarize this one slide to convince the non-believers. I really like these two analyses. One is from Forrester, that's this one, and the other one is from McKinsey. So this is the analysis that Forrester did during the global financial crisis in 2008. So it shows that companies that do well in CX, their dip is lower and they're also faster and better out of the crisis. We are going, of course, let's say from crisis to crisis, right? It's always going in flows. After the financial crisis, we had the COVID. So I think this is very valuable analysis that is still relevant, right? I think it will stay relevant for a long time. Then McKinsey, of course, has proven, yes, increasing satisfaction not only increases revenue, but it also reduces the cost to serve customers. And we've seen that and replicated that as well. And when we're working with a Randstad, so when companies do an analysis between finance and experience, they tend to do correlation. But correlation and cause and effect is not the same. So we did an analysis with Randstad where we proven literally cause and effect that enhancing the satisfaction of customers was impacting 8 out of their 14 financial KPIs. Right? So then again, yes, it was proven. So 9 out of 10 times, I never do a business case because companies I work with are already convinced. Um, but sometimes it's nice to just confirm, right, what everybody's saying. And every time that we've done such an analysis, it's always positive, meaning confirming, hey, customers that are happier, they yield more financial benefits than customers who are unhappy. But just a side note, whenever an organization comes to me with a question about CX and their starting point is a business case, then I always advise against that, right? Because when they feel the board is not convinced, the business case is never a solution. The solution is figuring out what really drives CX. And that's what we're going to share right now. Okay, so yes, there's money to be made, but there's a threshold, right? So a lot of companies are between a 7 and an 8 when it comes to satisfaction. And I think the comparison with NPS is between, let's say, 10 and 40. And they don't see the financial impact, which makes sense because from an 8 or more, as you can see in this picture, that's where you start to see the financial impact, right? That's where you see an exponential growth from a 9 plus even more on loyalty, meaning I do more and longer business with you, but also on trust. So also for the government side, I tend to have some debates. Well, for government, isn't a 7 fine? If you're looking to enhance trust, then also for governments, you want to be on an 8 or more. So yes, there's money to be made, but there's a threshold. And now the question is, okay, if we need to get to an 8 or 9 plus, what is the fastest way to get there? Okay, so I always do this short quiz. So let's assume this is the journey map of your customers. Let's say you're onboarding them in let's say what am I going to buy? Maybe a new insurance, right? So this is the journey of me getting an insurance policy. In the beginning, pretty happy, then halfway really unhappy, and at the end I'm relatively happy. If this would be your journey map and you would be responsible to improve it, what would you now choose? Would you say option A, of course, we need to fix the red smiley? Would you say option B, no, we're going to make the positive moments in the journey even more positive? Or option C, think IKEA and the ice cream after the paying for the furniture. No, we need to enhance the end smiley, right? The peak end rule. What would you now choose? Option A, B, or C? And you can just pause the video for a second to think about that. So the reason why I'm always doing this quiz is because this is exactly what happens with 90% of journey mapping research. It's qualitative research. It's asking customers or employees, hey, what are the emotional moments of the customer? And then we start brainstorming. So maybe we have a list of 20 ideas how we can improve this journey. But then when it comes to convincing other departments, you have no idea, okay, but what has the biggest impact? Should we start improving with should we start improving with option number 1 or intervention 6 or intervention 9? Because what's lacking in this picture is the impact. And maybe it's fine that there's a red smiley because that's a moment in the journey that doesn't really matter to me as a customer. But if that relatively happy smiley is something that's really crucial for my journey, then I want to make sure that happy smiley becomes even more happy. That's where the statistics come in, right? You need to understand, okay, but what has the biggest impact? So why these statistics? As I mentioned in the beginning, there's a difference between measuring rational needs and measuring latent subconscious needs. So all the NPS research and the trend of asking one question and then open text, it's focusing on our minds. It's focusing on our ratio. So the NPS question, would you recommend company X, is followed by open text Y. So I start thinking about it. I start thinking, well, I give an 8 because, I don't know, Pete from customer service was really friendly. So I start rationalizing my answer. Well, we, as human beings, are far from rational people. So you run the risk of thinking you know what matters to customers, while actually you're only collecting their rational impact, right? You don't know the true latent needs. So even nowadays, when Qualtrics and Medallia and all the survey tooling companies are saying, yes, but we have AI that can analyze thousands of open answers, be aware you're still analyzing the rational answers. So we need something else to figure out, okay, but here on the left side, what are the things that matter most? That's where the statistics come in. Okay, so statistics. I always say you should forget a lot about statistics. I also tried to do that after my PhD. But there are 4 things that are crucial if you want to be in the driving seat of, in this example, moving the 7.3 to an 8 point something, right? If you want to convince the rest of your organization, if you want to mobilize them, then these 4 elements are really crucial for you to know and to learn about your CX research. Okay, number 1. Number 1 is this percentage that stands for explained variance. You can forget about that. But what it means is, remember that I mentioned that one of the challenges is how do I know for sure that I'm asking the right questions? This percentage is answering that question for you. So this percentage is telling you, hey, in the eyes of the customer, in the survey that we built, did we cover the right topics? If it's 40, 40 or more, then you know, check in the box, we didn't miss anything crucial. If it's 30, 30 or less, then you definitely missed something in your journey workshop. Right, so as just to give an idea about the process, what do? We run the journey workshop 2.5 hours with employees from all the different departments, going through all the transactional steps, going through the emotions, and then we blend that into a survey that's pretty long, 30, 40 statements is no exception. And we send that survey to customers who have recently experienced that journey. Recently meaning not immediately after, because then you're measuring a touch point and not the journey, but 1 to 4 weeks after this journey has been finished. So in the example of the insurance, 1 to 4 weeks after I got my new insurance. And as soon as you have 100 or more surveys back, then you can run the statistical analysis. Just to have an idea about the process, how we get here. Okay, so the first thing, this percentage is telling you, are we asking the right questions? And now you have some ammunition to go back to that, director Pete that's saying, hey, it's all about speed. You can say, okay, Pete, that's really nice, but from the customer perspective, it's not really a big driver. And so you can really get rid of a lot of assumptions and gut feelings because now you have objective, steerable data from the customer perspective. That's number 1. Number 2, you see here that the impact of attention is 64 and the impact of the my account is 0.12. 5 times 12 is 60. So if you want to move the needle from the 7.3 to an 8 plus, you will do that 5 times faster by focusing your energy on improvements around attention than if you focus your energy on improving the My account. So this gives you laser focus, right? We have limited time, limited resources, but investing them in attention in this case is 5 times smarter than investing them in enhancing the My account. That's the second thing, right? You get hard steerable data to prioritize. Then the third, okay, attention, that's still a bit abstract. So that long survey of 30, 40 statements, we bring back to a top 10. And here you see exactly again in the eyes of the customers, right? So we are not grouping this. What does attention mean? And so in this case, it means listen to my needs, have enough time for me, and understand my situation. And so then you can start thinking, okay, that confirmation email, how do we again give more sense of understanding your situation, for example? And so you can use that to really make it very tangible across the journey. Okay, how can we enhance this feeling of tension? Fourth and final, remember that red smiley? In this case, the confirmation email would be the red smiley. So we as humans tend to quickly scan and want to fix the lowest score. But now you know, fixing the confirmation email is 3 times less impactful than if I would now start to improve these elements around attention. Right, so that's how you get to hard steerable information, and you're answering the challenges when it comes to research that I started with. One important thing around, let's say, the My account or digital stuff is almost never are the digital elements part of the top 10. Does that mean that we should stop digitization? No. But it does mean that you should use these drivers as design principles for your tech. And so how can the app, how can the website enhance the feeling of attention? Right? Also here, it's important to think about journeys and not about channels or touch points as such. Right? You want to balance and understand, okay, what are the drivers of the full journey across all the different channels that customers are using. Then, because now you know exactly what topics matter most, two things happen, right? Every time we've done this, and we've done this a gazillion times by now, we see an increase in this journey within 3 months' time, right? So it doesn't take years. And the second part is it's not just a zero point 0.1 or zero point 0.2 increase, we also see a significant increase. Why? Because now you know exactly where to improve. And because you have this hard, steerable data, you can easily mobilize employees in other departments to join and to start improving because now you can prove to them what has the biggest impact. All right. So when I talk about drivers and I talk about smart statistics, that's what I mean, right? It's always this one pager with the 10 things that matter most and then distinguishing the impact between the top, let's say, 3 or 4 topics. As I mentioned at the beginning, um, CX is, let's say, one type of experience that you want to use if you want to be successful in CX transformation. So a few years ago, I saw that a lot of companies were struggling, even speaking the same language, right? The call center is talking about customer experience. The digital team is talking about customer experience, and they're not understanding each other. So I started working with these 5 types of experience. And then you also see below that each type of experience has their metric that you want to use. So brand experience is all about, the sense of purpose. Why are we on this earth? Should guide all the other types of experience. I'm saying should because 9 out of 10 times brand tends to be focused really on the communication to the outside, but it's not translated into each detail of the journey, for example. Customer experience for me is from the moment I've decided I'm going to company X, all my journeys with the company, that's CX. How this company is even top of mind for me to consider, that for me is a brand experience, right? That's where I split the two. And I'm making things black and white here just so people have the same language. But of course, the key is to blend all of them together. For each journey, I want to know 2 things. Is this journey in line with my brand promise? And what are the key drivers that matter most to our customers in this journey, right? The statistics we just showed you. Employee experience for me, it's the same definition. So the scope of EX is all my journeys from the moment I'm in my recruitment journey, onboarding journey, I'm actually working at the company and I'm leaving. Why I would even consider applying for a job, that's, let's say, employer branding. So the employee version of brand experience. Also for employee experience, I want to know two things. Am I delivering a journey that's in line with my brand promise? But also, what are the key drivers for employee experience? So the statistics I just showed you work in exactly the same way for employee experience. Then service experience, that to me are the human channels. I call, I email, I chat. And again, here you want to understand, hey, is that in line with my brand promise? But also, should I focus on waiting time or should I focus on personal attention, right? So what are the drivers of service experience? And then UX for me, I'm also making pretty small the scope. For me, that's the digital side, right? It's the app, the My Account, the website. Service designers would definitely disagree, right? For them, UX is way broader. And for me, that's again not wrong. It's just a choice of perspective. Because what I just see is that if you make it all way too broad, then companies start struggling with what's what. And in most companies, UX is just the digital side. So for UX, you want to know exactly how easy are things, right? So how easy is it to use the website to, I don't know, check my invoice in the app? So when we look at the connected metrics, you see that I am, for example, not using NPS on a transactional level, right? A lot of companies are measuring after you call or after you email the transactional NPS. I always advise against that because it's way too volatile. And, the brain, if I recommend a company, that's never connected to just that one call, right? I will always consider more things. So for me, if you want to measure NPS, I'm not a fan of NPS, but so many companies have embraced it that we cannot ignore it. I also have a slideshare video, by the way, on. I'm now thinking, I'm not sure if I already made the slideshare video on NPS or if that's still on my to do. No, I think I did. And definitely also there's a podcast on pros and cons of NPS. If you want to know more and you want to get some ammunition to maybe convince your boards, maybe not sure if we should use NPS. But if you want to use it, then I always place it on brand experience once, maximum twice a year, to just have a sanity check. Are we moving in the right direction? And for me, it's not so much about the NPS question. For me, what's the key issue is the root cause analysis technique of the NPS. As you've now seen with my statistical example and the explanation of what's wrong with root cause technique, you understand, hey, okay to use the NPS question, but to figure out the drivers of NPS, use the same statistical driver analysis I just showed you. We've also tested that with NPS, and it works flawlessly there as well. Then for customer experience, for the journeys, I'm still a fan of satisfaction. We've tested also with journey NPS, and that works as well. For me, journey NPS is, let's say, less flawed than transactional NPS. I really wouldn't use it there. But still, I'm a fan of satisfaction. And yes, if it's an A plus or more, then you still see connection to revenue, right, to financial impact. For employee experience, AFCOM stands for effective commitment. And that's the scientific way of measuring my emotional engagement to the organization. So I will not go into too much detail, but I'll just drop a tiny bomb that 95% of all engagement tools, at least all the tools, actually in my case, and 100% of the tools I've reviewed on a request of clients, I've seen that they are not actually measuring engagement. They're doing something creative with eNPS, the question if I would stay or not, and then they mix that into an index and call it engagement. Well, that has nothing to do with the scientific way of measuring engagement. And those are just three statements, right? So that scientific definition is just free and available to use for anybody. So it's not super complex. You just need to know what to choose. Then service experience, for me, it's a combination of satisfaction. How satisfied were you with calling the call center? But also something that I call first time right. So first time right for me is not the same as first time fix. Yes, first time fix matters, and you should definitely keep measuring it because it has an impact. And so first time fix is answering my question in one call. First time right is preventing unnecessary calls. So are we doing the letter that we're sending first time right because it's clear? Is the website correct? Is our process correct? So first time right is the question that we added to our surveys. Dear customer, do you think we could have prevented this call? And trust me, you get around 30% of customers that say yes. So that's where you have a super fast, easy business case where you create happier customers while reducing the cost or creating more time for employees to spend it on things that matter most to customers. Then on the UX side, that to me is where you want to measure the customer effort score. And so how easy was it? The app made it easier for me to check my invoice. Um, so the customer effort score to me is not in the service setting. Yes, we always add the statement, it was easy for me to do something, but it's not an end metric. For me, the customer effort score is way too transactional to be measuring in other locations than only on the digital side. And on that side, right, the customer effort score, because it's so transactional, there it's perfectly fine to just have the statement, the app makes it easy for me to check my invoice, and then an open text, and depending on the score, if it's a lower score, hey, I'm sorry, can you give us one idea that would have made it easier for you? And then you can throw AI at it because the transactional side, it's no problem to use open text and rational answers. So these 5 types of experience, I always get feedback that it's really helpful for companies to use this framework to also understand because these 5 types of experience tend to be also very different departments. Brand tends to be on the marketing side. CX is often a CX team. EX is HR. Service experience is call center, and UX tends to be a digital team or also on the marketing. And they don't really talk to each other. Right? So this framework is really helpful again to connect departments and to understand the same language and how we can help each other. All right, so now you understand the first step is okay, how do I really understand what has the biggest impact on CX so I can convince, mobilize, energize people across the organization to actually do something with the insights. And one specific way to do that, of course, you can use service design to enhance journeys. But one element that I really want to show you in this presentation is, okay, but how do I also change things on the behavior side? Because what we tend to see is that the number one driver of customers is almost always related to the human aspect, meaning behaviors of employees. So we're getting into the science of behavioral change, which is very challenging and interesting puzzle. So I've been reading a lot of books on behavioral change, and for me, these two that you see here, Tiny Habits or Atomic Habits, if you prefer, and Life at Work, are definitely must reads and more importantly, must use in your CX transformation program. So how did I get here? So this picture in the middle, it's not a stock picture. It's actually a picture that we took. And I was working at the time with Randstad. Randstad is a global HR company. And we had mapped all the journeys, we found all the drivers, and then we got to the stage. Okay, we want to create some ambassadors. But ambassadors, you tend to have two issues. One is kind of boring because the IT department for the new CRM also has ambassadors, and the number of ambassadors is always way too low. Like 10 ambassadors need to mobilize 2,000 people. So I said back then to a partner in crime, I said, hey, crazy idea. The program was called Customer Delight. I said, what if we create Customer Delight Angels? We have some fun and energy with it. And she looked at me and said, like, oh my God, this is never going to work within Randstad. But credits to her. Let's give it a try. And as you see, it's not just about angels, right? We have different topics. We have had fire starters, we had OGs, DJs. So the key message here is, what is behavioral science saying? You should create a lot of fun and energy around whatever you are doing when you're designing transformation programs. So what do we do? Right? So we've found those drivers, and let's say one of the key drivers is personal attention. Now, what we used to do is that we would run workshops with employees to start brainstorming on, okay, how can we improve personal attention? And that worked pretty well, but I always like to keep improving because what we saw, and maybe you've seen it as well, when you do brainstorm sessions, you tend to see two things, maybe three things. Um, the ideas that you get are really abstract, like we need to have a new CRM system or a new website. And the ideas tend to be not about themselves, right? It tends to be about other departments. And employees struggle to make it really tangible and really concrete. So what we did is we said, okay, using the theory of tiny habits, we are now making a menu of tiny habits. So we create a menu of 10 tiny habits around personal attention, in this example, for example, call center agents. Right? So we blend the driver with the key roles in the organization, whether it's customer or non-customer facing, and we make, let's say, 3 to 4 customized menus of 10 tiny habits that they can choose from. And so we check which roles do we have. Hey, we have call center agents, maybe we have account managers, we have non-facing roles, and we have, of course, leaders. You take the key drivers that you found in the research, and then you start creating tiny habits. And those tiny habits, they need to be tiny, but they also need to be integrated in the daily work existing routines of customers. That's also part of the tiny habits theory. And as you see here, it says a link to the tiny habits. So I have a different slideshare video where I explain in detail how the tiny habits work, including the theory behind tiny habits, if you want to check that out. So an example of a tiny habit is in a call center. This was a call center where the agent got this bleep in their ear whenever there was a new call waiting. So we said, okay, tiny habit is after I hear this bleep in my ear, I think for 2 seconds, how can I give this customer more personal attention? Just by doing that for 2 seconds, you will have a different conversation with your customer. Right? So it's tiny and it's fully integrated in their existing routines. It's not routines. It's not extra work. Then what we also did is that we also created a menu of habits for leadership. And so now we have, let's say, this database of habits, but think of for a team leader, for example, whenever after I start my PC, I ask one team member, hey, how are you doing with your tiny habits? Or for senior leaders, the first 5 minutes of each team meeting, we start about sharing, hey, last week, what was one impactful moment that we did for customers, etc. Right? I can continue with the whole list, but also create habits for leadership because what I've seen is that there are hardly any leaders that say, hey, I don't want to be part of this. But a lot of them are asking, okay, but what can I do? So also for them, it's really helpful if you can just share a list of activities or habits that they can choose from. So they really understand, okay, this is not only making my role very tangible, but I can also choose one of the examples that resonates most with me, right? So the energy part is really crucial in whatever you design. Talking about energy, so then our goal is to get, let's say this is a company of 2,000 employees. We want to ensure that at least 10%, so 200 of all the employees, is really excited and energized to do something, right? To be part of this Tiny Habits program. So what do we do to energize them? So the first step, what we've done before we get here is that we've shared the results of the driver analysis with everybody in the organization. So we've done a quiz, right? We've done a quiz. That's, by the way, a crucial tip that I forgot in the driver analysis part. Never just share the drivers because then people will say, yeah, I already knew this. We always do a quiz where we ask, what do you think is a driver? What do you think the customers are rating you? That's not just fun, and having a nice competition, but it's really crucial because then 50% of the answers they will have wrong. And then they're only really open to understand, hey, what are these drivers really telling us? So never forget that tip, right? Always do a quiz. So before we get to this campaign, people have participated in the quiz, they've seen the results, and we've sort of announced, hey, this is coming, right? We are going to launch a campaign where you can participate to help enhance experience. So then we get to the stage, we design a week-long campaign, email, but also think about offline things like posters, etc. But the idea is that every day, all the employees, so all the 2,000 in this case, receive an email with a call to action. So on day one, for example, it's an email from the CEO. On day two, it's an email from a fellow call center agent. Day three, it's from the CX department, right? So you think smartly which 5 people have the biggest influence also informally, right? Which will inspire most employees to join. And then each day is a short video, right, of the person that is in that email. They've recorded a video, and that's again not super corporate, right? That's just, for example, me recording it with a phone, but always asking 3 questions. One is, why do you think CX matters for our organization? Two is, why did you decide to join, to be a fire starter, to be a angel, or whatever the topic is? And three is, which tiny habit are you going to test yourself? And then when you record it, as you can see here in the picture, right, we had the OGs theme, so we had some gold stuff. So just make sure it's also fun and energizing to watch the videos in the theme that you've chosen, right? So the choice of the theme is really crucial. So every day they receive this email, and let's say the text of the email is something like, hey, do you want to enhance your impact on the customer? Do you want to lead by example? Do you want to experiment, etc.? Sign up, right? So the only call to action is sign up, and then they just leave their name and their email. And then the goal, as I mentioned, is to get 10% of them as a minimum to join, because that's from science saying that's the minimum that you need to start mobilizing the rest of the organization. And as you see here, so far we've always been between 30 and 60% of people being energized to join. So apparently there's something there, right? There's something fun, there's something energizing. I think it's also connected to their sense of purpose and a sense of impact, because they're going to work on the things that matter most to customers. Right? So that's again where CX, EX, and purpose are beautifully aligned. Then what we also did, because of course everything is digital, so also make sure that you think about the offline experience, like posters. A client of ours, they did posters like in the elevator, on the screens, or QR codes, like tiny cards. Having some goodies, like we made a beautiful booklet with all the tiny habits in it. But just think consciously about how you can also design the non-digital elements to mobilize and create a lot of energy around it. And then a crucial part is, okay, so the idea, right? So they sign up, they choose one, maximum 3 habits, but ideally one, because we prefer they do one well than that they do 3 half. And then you ask them, okay, for the next 6 weeks, you'll be experimenting with that tiny habit. What we realized quickly, of course, is, okay, if they don't hear anything from us for 6 weeks, there's a good chance that at the end of the 6 weeks they will think, ooh, tiny habit. I don't really remember which one I chose. So what we do during these 6 weeks, again from behavioral science theory, is that we nudge them. So twice a week, a very short email. Hey Zanna, it's now 5 p.m. Wouldn't it be nice to end the day with making a customer happy? Right? So just really short messages, just the subject line of the email is enough for them to think, oh yeah, I was doing something with a tiny habit. Then we evaluate after 6 weeks qualitatively with the employees to just understand, hey, was this habit valuable for you in your daily work? Did you maybe get some feedback from customers that you didn't get before? And is this a habit where you feel, hey, all my colleagues should actually adopt this habit? Another tip here is not just create a form, but also record a few of them on video, just a 10-minute video, and you can make a beautiful after movie out of that with some amazing quotes. One of the quotes that I love the most is that we got feedback that we're saying, this makes my work more fulfilling. Again, CX, EX purpose, beautifully connected. So to summarize, remember that we started with some of the challenges. So in my experience, when you combine these smart statistics and driver analysis with tiny habits, you're fixing a lot of the most common CX challenges. You're fixing the problem that leadership is not embracing CX because now you made it super tangible for them what they can do with their habits, but also you have hard steerable information, right? That speaks the language. That's also your link to business impact. It's not just fluffy, right? You can prove that it works. You can show within 3 months that it actually increases. Now you also have a very clear framework. Hey, we have limited resources. These topics have the biggest impact. So let's map, for example, all the backlog elements from IT and see, hey, how much of these backlog elements are actually connected to the number one driver? Not that many. Okay, so maybe we need to add there. You make sure that other departments are prioritizing CX because now they understand the impact and the benefits to them. And you can also now understand, hey, based on these drivers, um, and these are the top three issues of this department, how can we blend these together so we can help each other? For employees, it's not just, oh, this is like project 365 that I don't have time for. No, it's really integrated in their daily work. And with the tiny habits and the drivers of customers, again, here, right, the final remark, CX and EX are, in that case, super simple to connect together. And even also, you can enhance a sense of purpose. So this is how we run our CX transformation programs successfully in the last couple of years. We're also improving all the time, but for now, what we see, the driver analysis is always a standard part of the approach, and the tiny habits as well. Everything after or around that, that tends to be more customized, but these two core elements are always the key starting point, and then we take it from there to get it more into the DNA. So I hope this was inspirational, gave you maybe some new insights that you didn't have before. And if you want to learn more, as I mentioned, a lot of podcasts, additional videos on YouTube, a blog, so a book, right? So enough content if you want to dive a little deeper. So for now, I wish you a beautiful day, and maybe we'll see each other in the next video. Ciao.